All right, another podcast from the Michigan Institute of Athletics in Brighton, Michigan. It's going to be an awesome podcast today. Right before we get into it, I want to shout out VetLife. VetLife is a 501c3 nonprofit company. It's a company of veterans for veterans. Every veteran faces difficulties when they transition from active duty back to civilian life, and VetLife is there to ease that transition. If you want to reach out to VetLife, you can do so through Instagram or Facebook, or check out their website at vetlifetoday.org. So without further ado, I want to introduce Fallon Johnson, one of the female fighters here on the team, undefeated female fighters on the team. You've only recently joined the program within the last year and a half or so, and I know a bit of your background, but really nowhere near the full story, only bits and pieces. So I want to start this podcast kind of the way that I start all my episodes. I don't really want to know about the woman that you are today yet. I want you to take me all the way back, where you were born and raised, what you were like as a young woman, the things that were influential to you, or what you thought this life was going to have in store for you, and then we'll slowly build up to today.
All right. Well, thank you for having me on. So I grew up in Novi, Michigan, so not too far from here. I spent my whole life there. I was a dancer my entire youth growing up, so I spent every day in school at Novi, and then I would go to dance practice every single night for the rest of the day. That was pretty much my life growing up. I spent summers. I started off probably end of middle school, going to summer programs. I did a couple in New York. I did one out in LA. And that was kind of where I got my decision to I really wanted to move to New York. I wanted to get out of Michigan. I felt like there was bigger and better things for me. And I knew I wanted to dance. So I spent all of high school working extremely hard to get scholarship, to get into these extremely competitive dance programs. And I ended up at NYU. So NYU, I think they take 35 kids a year into the dance program. So it's super competitive. It's way more expensive than others, so I knew I couldn't really go there if I didn't get scholarship to make it at least compared to the other schools I was looking at. So I did that, and I went out to NYU, and that was super exciting, and I thought my whole life was going to be amazing, and I was going to be this New Yorker, and that was who I always thought I wanted to be, and it was for a while. The last couple years I was there, I finished school, and after I finished school in dance, I kind of didn't think that was really what I wanted to do for my career anymore. And it took me a while to figure out what I wanted to do. And I got into some personal training. That's when I started coaching kickboxing and got into jiu-jitsu. But I still felt like I really wanted to be there. And it wasn't really till about a year ago now that I finally moved home and got into MMA and figured all my stuff out.
All right, so let's take this story one chapter at a time. So how was dance introduced to you initially? Did it come from your family? Did you just see something that sparked your interest? What pulled you to dance, and how old were you when you started?
I was probably 2.5. I was a baby.
Wow, so was it a family influence? Your mother and father just wanted to put you in dance? Did you have a sister in it?
Yeah, my sister danced. I mean, my parents put me in a lot of things growing up. I did dance, I did gymnastics. I think I did soccer when I was really tiny. I did a season of basketball in middle school, but it got to a point, definitely I did dance and gymnastics for a while, and then it got to the point where I had to kind of pick something to put all my time into, and I decided to go all in with dance.
Do you remember when you were little why you picked dance?
Not specifically. I think I knew as a gymnast, I saw looking at Olympic gymnasts, and they were all shorter, and that wasn't my body type, so I loved it, but I kind of ruled that out for long-term stuff. And I just really enjoyed dancing, and I was there all the time, and I was working really hard, but it never felt like work. I had a lot of friends, a lot of amazing relationships were made in my dance studio, and I wanted to develop all my time in there.
So do you think dance was a massive part of your identity growing up? That's kind of where you pulled your confidence from. That's was helping to shape you as a person. That's what you were known for amongst your community or amongst your school. You think dance was a big part of your identity? And were there any other major factors that stood out in your identity?
Yeah, I think dance was probably the main one. I danced at my studio. I danced at my high school. I danced every place that I went to. I was always if I was traveling, unless I was on a family trip, it was for dance. Everywhere I went, I went to LA, I went up to Blue Lake, I went to different intensives and things, and everything was based around that. So I think it was a big part of my identity, but also like that's where I developed so many of my close friendships growing up too, that it was just my like entire community was kind of wrapped around that.
So it sounds like your parents were also ultra involved, like going to LA, going to these like major intensive camps. Did they see that they believed in the future you were going to be maybe a professional dancer, or did they see like the New York trajectory, or were they just supporting a young, passionate kid going, hey, if this is what you're all in on, then we're all in it with you too?
Yeah, I think that they saw that that was where I wanted to be and that was what I wanted to do. And like, I remember my mom growing up, like, she would just tell me, like, whatever you want to do, like, we support you and we want you to go all in with that. So they were like, if that's New York, like, we're going to help you figure out how to make it work and help you. Like, I had to take like extra classes and extra things to get myself to that level. And they were always like supportive and like driving me there, flying me there, like doing all those things to make sure I could do it.
So tell me the best parts of what dance did for you, or just the things that you remember the most, the things that maybe shaped you from being a dancer. Like, why was your life better because of dance?
I think a lot of it was like confidence. Like anybody that dances now, or like if you take any type of like fitness class or whatever you do, like to go to like intensives and meet a whole new group of people like at least once a year, usually more than that. Like it's hard and it's kind of scary and it's intimidating, but the more often you do that, I think the more you get to like push yourself and develop that skill set. And I think just the close relationships, like a lot of my like dance teachers growing up were like my biggest like mentors and like the people you could talk to about anything and were just very supportive. So I think that was like the main things.
So it sounds like it was almost to a level of a little bit of an obsession. It was the main thing that you did. From the way that I'm hearing your story, it was like this is what you were all in on. Were there any bad sides of dance, or like a dark side of dance? A lot of times people that are all in on something, there is so much positive, but then there's some, I had a girl on recently, her name was Janelle, who was all in on gymnastics. Her entire life was gymnastics. But then when she talked about kind of the rough side, she talked about eating disorders that she had struggled with to maintain a body type. She talked about, having almost no connections outside of that small community because she couldn't relate to those people. Like, she spoke about a lot of things that people wouldn't, injuries. Like she said, she had back injuries and things that really plagued her for a period of time. Were there any real strong downsides that you can remember, or was it a pretty smooth sail? I mean, obviously, there's always little difficulties, but do you remember anything that was substantial?
Yeah, I mean, overall, it was definitely positive and definitely like a high part of my life. One thing definitely like when I decided not to dance anymore, I think I definitely like felt like I was losing a big part of my identity, which was like took a while for me to like really like figure out what else I wanted to do. Injuries in dance, like, yeah, like, I mean, just like martial arts, like if you're training every single day, like you're gonna deal with injuries. Like, I think it was my senior year, I was like dealing with like a serious back injury and like it was competition season. I was like, well, we're gonna figure it out. And like, I'd be like heating my back and like getting on stage and just like making it work. Doing like point dance, if anyone like where you're up on your toes, like it's really hard. It's really painful. Like I teach it to the kids now and they're like, this sucks. And I'm like, yeah, but like you work through it and like you might lose a toenail or two, but like if you do it 'cause you love it. And I think it's kind of a weird obsession when you think about it from the outside, but it's like so beautiful to watch and so beautiful to just like create. And I really enjoyed like all of it.
So let's talk about, you're in high school. Let's discuss the time where you're considering going to NYU. That's a huge step. The Michigan girl that's going to move across the country to the East Coast, to the big city, the Big Apple. Like, I mean, that I can picture the young dreamer that's like, this is what I'm going to do. This is who I'm going to become. You're looking in the future and you're seeing a very bright future. And you're like, I'm actually made for this. Like, look at my whole life has led me to this point. Were there any pivotal moments in your high school career, good or bad? And then let's talk about when you make that jump. A lot of the times we create in our head what we believe to be the reality of like what it's going to be like when I get there. This is how I'm going to be treated. This is what it's going to feel like. We create this whole story. And then a lot of times the reality doesn't match the story. But just talk about that period. Were there any influential times in high school that really shaped you as a person? And then talk to me about the girl that's on the border of making that jump, and then that jump in as much detail as you can.
Yeah, so I think my first summer where I went to New York, like, I think it was probably like a 2-week intensive, and like my mom flew me in, dropped me off, and then like I was there and I was on my own for 2 weeks. And I think that was the first time I fell in love with New York itself and just like how much there is to do and how accessible the city is. And just like how much talent there is in that city, and like it pushes you to get to a level that you probably wouldn't get to if you didn't go there. So that was probably like, I don't know if that was before or after freshman year, but it was definitely like early high school. And yeah, I mean, I think after that point, I really just like devoted myself to that. There were some ups and downs like throughout high school, just like with friends and figuring out like outside of my dance friends, like struggling to fit in with different people and feeling like I didn't really have a place. But like I always had my dance friends to rely on, and like my family there and my actual family, we were always super close and super supportive. So I always had somewhere to be safe and protected, and to just like push myself to get there. Yeah, and then like later in high school, I kind of knew I wanted to go to New York. I remember my parents were like, let's apply to like Wayne State and like have a backup just in case. But I think I applied to like 3 or 4 schools in New York. I applied to one out in LA, and it was just like trying to get in. Like, it's not just normal college application process. Like, you're applying to the school, you're going to an audition, you're waiting to hear from the school, you're waiting to hear from the dance school, and like figuring all of that out. So it was just a matter of like every day of senior year, just waiting to see and like what's in the mail, and like, did we get in? Did we get any financial aid? Like, how are we going to do this? And yeah, I don't think I didn't expect to get into NYU. I didn't really know anyone that had gone to that program. Like, the other schools in New York I applied to, like Marymount, like that was probably like my closest. Like, I was like, I think it's attainable. Like, it's really hard, but like I thought it was attainable, and I got in there, and that was like really exciting. I was like, okay, I can do this. We can go. And then getting into NYU was like shocking. And I remember a few days later, like opening up like the financial aid system was like super complicated, and I couldn't figure out what I was reading. And I remember like seeing that I got a scholarship, and I was like, what, did this really happen? Like, are we sure? Like, did they really give me a scholarship? And that was like, okay, like now I can really go and I can really pursue this dream. And I felt like that too for me was like kind of gave me like the right to do it. Like, I felt like I had like made it enough to like actually go and actually pursue this dream.
So I'm picturing like a very empowered young woman who didn't know if she was enough for the opportunity that she sought to attain. You get accepted. It's unbelievable. That was probably an incredible moment to like tell your parents and tell your sister and tell your dance friends, like, I got accepted into NYU. That's like, that is a dream come true. Once you go there, what was the shocks that you experienced? What were the good? What was the bad? What was just different than your expectations? And you had briefly mentioned like, and I decided to step away from dance. That had to have been a massive decision because you were a dancer your entire life up to that point. Something drove you down a different path. Really break down that aspect of your life.
Yeah, so I got to New York. I think it was just like kind of I like knew from going so many times for like, I had spent like probably a month at a time there and stuff over the years. So I like knew somewhat what to expect of the city, but like, I mean, you're at NYU, you're at like in this small class of people, and like everyone's talented. So it was like from day one, it's like I made so many amazing friends, but at the same time, it's like that constant competitive energy, and like everyone's working their hardest, and it's like you're just constantly trying to stay at the top and constantly trying to be your best. Yeah, and definitely like my first year, I remember I was like super excited and just like loved every minute of it. And I always like, I held myself to the standard. I was always like, I cannot miss a class. Like, I was like, I don't know why I was so obsessed with it. Like, you could have absences, like a certain number. And I was like, nope, I have to be at class every single day. Like, I can slack off a little bit here and there, but if I show up to class, like, that's my gold standard. So I don't know. I think I kind of like burnt myself out a little bit in that I was like, I did not take enough rest. And like, I dealt with some injuries, like a strained hamstring and stuff throughout the years that I was there. And like, we had a great PT on site, and like I definitely worked through things, but I felt like my body obviously took a toll because it's like you're dancing every day for probably upwards of 4 to like 6 hours at least, like probably every day. But yeah, I mean, I loved NYU. I loved performing, and then I just got to the end, and like I remember I had my first like paid dance job and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. And I went to all these rehearsals while I was still in my senior year. And then I got no money for the rehearsals and I got like a check for I think like a couple $100 after the last performance. And I was like looking at like graduation and I was like, okay, like I made it. I finished school. How am I going to pay my bills? And I like got that check and I was like, as exciting as it was that I got like finally paid for like what I wanted to do, it was also like kind of a realization that I was like, yes, people make money in it. And I have a lot of friends I graduated with that are still successful in it. But I like kind of saw the other side and I was like, do I want to keep pushing this for this long? And like, when is the return going to be? And like, what am I going to do in the meantime? So yeah, I mean, when I graduated, I was like, okay, like, I think the first thing on my mind was like, okay, I want to be able to pay my bills by myself. And like, if you've been to New York, like, it is not cheap. It is the most expensive city in the world for like, I think my first apartment, I lived in an interior room that was supposed to be an office and had no windows. And like, if you closed the door, it was pitch black. And I was like paying like over $1,000 a month. And so I like took like a sales job. I did door-to-door sales for probably like 2 or 3 months when I first graduated. And I was like, I'm going to pay my bills. I'm going to make it. And then I was like, okay, I hate my life. I'm not making money. And I was like not able to actually audition or pursue anything else. And then I started teaching. I taught dance at this like small music school like far out in New Jersey. And I was taking like, I lived in Queens. I was going across New York City into New Jersey on like a bus and a train to get out to the school to like teach. And there was like a few kids there and like sometimes nobody showed up. And then after doing that for a little while, I took an interview at CKO Kickboxing in Jersey City. And I had done like, I want to say it was my sophomore year. I worked at this like Krav Maga place doing like front desk work. And they were like, take classes while you're here. And I was like, I saw them and it's like Israeli self-defense and it's really intense. And I was like, okay, I was like a dancer and like didn't really know what I was doing. But so I had like taken martial arts classes. So I was like, okay, kickboxing instructor. I like read the thing and I was like, I can do that. Like I can fake it till I make it. I do this for a living. And I was like, okay. So I went to the interview and like started taking kickboxing classes. And I was like, it was from Queens to Jersey City is not close, but it is a lot closer than where I was going at the time. Yeah, and then I just got like obsessed with it and started doing that full time and built myself as a personal trainer, as a kickboxing instructor. And like, I think that was where I started just finding myself again.
Would you say you went through a little bit of a depression during those times where it's like you had almost followed your path as you should in your mind? Like a young, passionate person did everything they were supposed to do. You sought out a high-level university, you got in, you got an NYU, you graduated, you made it through the program. There was probably ups and downs, but like now all of a sudden, now what? Now it's like, where's the opportunity? Where's the next step? Like, yeah, I just graduated from NYU and I can't even pay my bills with what I just went for. Do you remember having times in that period where you were like trying to figure out how to be a dancer, or was it just so overwhelming and stressful that you almost wanted to step away from being a dancer a little bit to like find that safety net for yourself, and then you would find a way to put dance back into the picture? Like, I'm trying to picture what that period of life was like for you.
Yeah, I think it was that. And I remember my parents telling me, they were like, keep auditioning, like we're here to support you. And I think like it was just like as soon as I graduated, I was like, I don't want to rely on you guys anymore. Like I really want to, like, if I'm gonna stay here and like stay in the big city, like I want to be making that for myself. So even though they were like telling me all that and like willing to be supportive of me, I was like, it was for me. I was like, I need to find something that's gonna like do it.
You wanted to be able to stand on your own feet.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I just graduated NYU. I've done all this. You've been great. You've supported me, but it's time for me to be an adult now. Like I got to be able to take care of myself. And that's an extreme pressure. And it's like that eats away at your confidence, that eats away at your self-worth. Like if you can't provide for yourself, it is a very low feeling, you know? So you get into CKO kickboxing. It sounds like you started to coach there quite a bit, enough to be able to pay your bills just with CKO, or were you doing multiple things at once?
Yeah, I think for a while I was still like teaching at the dance little music school too, but it was primarily there. And like, I remember because I was like such a big commute, it was probably at least an hour, like on 2 to 3 trains each way every single day. And like, I started just taking like the only class openings I think were usually like the early morning, like the 5:45 a.m. classes or like the 8 p.m. So I was like, I'm just going to like take what I can get and then like stick around. And like that's when I started like taking as many classes as I can. Like if I was like, okay, I'm in New Jersey, I don't live here, like there's nowhere for me to go that's home. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to like train as much as I can. I started doing CrossFit and like I had lifted before, but like really like learning and understanding that. And that way when I started doing more personal training, I like was like, okay, now I like have enough confidence to actually like teach other people how to do this and not just like feel like I don't know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I started just like literally like every single day. I was there from probably like 5:36 in the morning until like late in the evenings, and just like every opportunity I had, I was either like training somebody, or like I started working like on the front desk. I went into like sales there for a little while and helping like develop in that way too, which I think was a really great opportunity for me in that.
Where did that work ethic and desire, or like, why were you able to be like that? Most people don't have that, Fallon. Most people, if you put them in a situation like that, what you're describing right now, they don't look at that as opportunity. They look at that as like hell. Like, oh my God, I have to just stay here and find a way to pick up whatever classes are available and maybe, work for free, although it's not really working when you're learning alongside somebody. The way you're speaking right now has no victim mentality at all. You were just kind of like, this was the situation that I was in, and I was trying to make the best of it. Where did that mindset come from?
I think that started from dance, honestly. Like that was the first, like when I started out and I was like seeing times when I was like, okay, I need to get better. Like I have these big dreams, these big goals. And I was like wanting to move to New York to be a dancer. I was like, okay, I need to get better. And I would start doing like extra ballet classes. Like, oh, I have a day off. Instead, I'm going to go take like a 2-hour ballet class, or like do things like that. So I was like always looking for that growing up.
So you would say, if we had to summarize what you just explained there, you had a dream or an ideal or something that you were chasing that was almost pulling you into the future or into becoming a better version of yourself, or one that was more capable and competent so that you might be able to achieve that vision. You think it was essential to have that thing that was like pulling you up, so that you did look at this as like opportunity to grow, a chance to learn, et cetera. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, 100%.
So let's now talk about like really your transition into martial arts, because you sit here today as an undefeated amateur female fighter who is going for her first title fight coming up against a top-ranked national opponent. You're going to be turning professional in the very near future, but that came together pretty fast. Now, luckily, you had the background of dance. You have the athleticism. You have the mind for martial arts. You have the work ethic and the consistency. That sounds like it's the same work ethic that was existing in that period of your life. How did you really find true martial arts, and what made you decide to like go all in the way that you did with dance?
Yeah, so I started, obviously, like I did the CKO. I had an old boyfriend that trained jujitsu, so he had like, I remember he took me to a class in like Brooklyn, was probably my first jujitsu class ever. And then I like didn't go again for a while, and I went back like 2 months later, and I trained with the exact same girl, and she had beat me up the first time, and then like the second time was like way worse. And that was kind of when I flipped the switch, and I was like, okay, if I'm going to take any jujitsu, like I need to do it the same way, like dial in and like actually learn and figure it out so I can be better the next time I come, and not just like get beat up worse every time I keep coming. So yeah, I transitioned, like I did CKO kickboxing and I coached that, and I like love that, especially because it's like so fitness and like music based. So I really enjoyed it. But I started training into jiu-jitsu and into more like stand-up kickboxing for actually like with opponents and everything for about 3.5 years or so. And then when I moved back, or I competed in jiu-jitsu also while I was there. So I competed mainly when I was a purple belt. I started competing with like IBJJF. I would travel just because like they weren't coming to New York at the time. So I had to like take trips. Like I would go to like Houston, Austin, New Orleans, like Atlanta, all these places with the Renzo Gracie team. And just like, I was like, okay, like I want to do this. I want to be competitive again. And so I started competing and doing all that.
It sounds like you moved through the ranks really quickly too. I mean, it sounds like you did go all in, and you were probably making the progress and earned every step of the way. But you're saying you're at like 3 years in, you're competing IBJJF purple belt. Like you took it seriously after that second beating by that girl. We got to shout her out. Thank you, girl, whoever you are. it made you dial in. It made you that same type of energy where you said like, okay, this is a challenge. And if I'm going to do this, I have to level up. I have to find a way to dedicate more, take it as lesson and move forward. Your progress in jiu-jitsu started to come rather quickly to you, would you say, maybe because of your athleticism and dance background?
Yeah, 100%. I remember for the first probably like year, I was training like 90% of the time. If I was at like my home gym, I was like the only female in the room. So like every day I was like, all right, I'm either learning or I'm going to just like keep getting like pinned by these guys that are like have 100 pounds on me. So I was like, it kind of forces you to learn fast, which I think is an advantage that smaller females have. But yeah, so I leveled up pretty fast. I think I got my purple belt within the first 3 years of training. And then just like right away, I was like, okay, I got my purple belt and I started competing at purple belt. And like, I didn't always win, but I was like pretty much always on the podium and like being competitive and working as hard as I could.
So then, I don't know how much you want to go into this part, but I really think it's a huge part of your story. You then got into a relationship at some part. I don't know if it was from this academy or you had changed schools or whatever it was, but that, led you into some dark times, and it's why probably you sit here today. I mean, had you been in a good relationship out in New York or New Jersey, who's to say you wouldn't still be out there just being a jiu-jitsu practitioner? How did that come into the picture? You can talk as much as you want about the difficulties that you faced into that situation, and then moving back home, getting your mental state back, etc.
Yeah, so I had been competing like nonstop, going a million miles a minute, and then like about a year from before I came back and moved home.
Wait, and you were single at this time when you're purple belt jiu-jitsu, you're competing, or you're already in a relationship?
I had been in a different relationship for like 5 years, and then that ended, and then the relationship after for like the last year, like I stopped competing, just kind of lost my sense of self in that, and it was just not a great period of time. And I don't know like why I stayed for so long. I think I like part of it was like it was like really like all my identity again just kind of felt like wrapped up in like living there, and like I was like my only other out really felt like coming back here, and like I think it felt like such a huge step back at the time, that I was like, and I mean I thought from the beginning like I thought it was going to be this like amazing thing and like things were going to be better than ever, and it just wasn't that. So yeah, that went on for about a year, and then finally at the end of the day I like picked up and I came back home. And it was a huge struggle, like not only because of my identity, but just like things I went through that last year were pretty unhappy, and I was like not in a good place mentally. But I think it opened me up this past year. I've made definitely more progress on myself than like any of the years prior, and like that's definitely saying something considering how hard I've worked in the past. So yeah, I moved home, started going to therapy, which I think is like an amazing tool, and that's like helped me so much in like developing my mindset and my mental strength again, my confidence again. And then just, yeah, I went all in on MMA. I was like, within like 2 weeks of being back, I was like, okay, we're going to go to this gym here. We're going to figure it out. And I think I told you pretty soon after being back, I was like, all right, I do want to fight. And I took my first fight in like November, and 3-0 now. So
let's break down each one of these chapters. So you're in New York, you're doing it on your own, you're trying to be independent, you're working, you're hustling, you're learning, you're competing in jiu-jitsu, like, and your parents are all seeing all this from a distance, and they're probably very proud still, like, oh man, look at what Fallon's doing, all these things. You have to make that transition to be like, hey, mom, dad, like, I need to get out of this place. It's not a good spot for me. I need to come back home. It sounds like up to this point in your story, I've heard nothing but support from your parents. I don't know if they were all supporting you as a jiu-jitsu practitioner, or if they just kind of looked at it as like, oh, that's just a hobby thing she does. Like, she'll find her. But when you told them like, hey, I have to come back home, kind of describe what that was like. Did you move back in with them? Did you move into your own place? And then when you first came back, was that the first time you ever visited here, or had you been here previously? Because I remember you were in for a very small period, then you were gone, and then you had come back in. Just kind of walk me through that period.
yeah, so I had come back probably like a month or two prior to like fully moving back. And I thought I had moved back, so I came here for the first time, and I was here for probably like a week or two, talked to you about fighting. And then again, like some negative things like pulled me back to being in Jersey. So I was there for a little while, and at least at that point, but really always, like my parents were always like, we would love for you to come home. Like they always wanted me to be back here. And I was always like, no, I'm good. Like I don't want to be there. And then like finally I was like, okay, this is like the right move. So I made that move back. I moved in with them for a while just to like get settled. And it was really nice too, especially at the beginning, like having that support every day of like being around family again and like having people that are just like loving and supportive of you around all the time. Yeah, I mean, I don't really know if my parents ever have had expectations of what I was going to do, because I don't know if like I ever have known what I'm going to like end up doing at the end of the day. They had come, I like competed at an IBJJF in Detroit once, like probably a year or two prior, and like they came and saw it, and I remember like even in like the gi jiu-jitsu, they were like, oh, we don't really love watching this, but like they were always in my corner to support me. But yeah, they were never like really like saw how much time I was investing in it and everything. So then when I moved home and like when I did fully start training here, and I was like coming home at like 9 p.m. every night and like exhausted, and like all my sweaty gear was in the garage, and they were like, oh, she like really does this, and like started seeing me like occasionally have like a black eye and stuff like that. And then they were like, oh, we don't really enjoy that you do this. But yeah, they've always just been like very supportive of me as a person and like me figuring out what it is that I want to do. Whether or not they love that it's MMA, but they're still like a very supportive part of my life.
So you're alluding to something here, which you haven't fully said it, and maybe I'm overthinking it, but it's almost like you need your independence. You need to stand on your own 2 feet. And it's almost like anything that's like taking away from that independence, you kind of shun. Like you're like, like I needed to be able to do this for my own. Did you feel that conflict? Because I'm hearing throughout the story, like support. But when you come back home and you just have this safety net, does that almost give you an uncomfortable feeling? Or like, do you not like that? It seems like there are a lot of dream chasers in life. They just have to do it on their own. Like even with people they're from, and they can appreciate those, but there's like a part of their being that's just like, no, like I need to be able to stand on my own 2 feet and achieve the things that I want to achieve. Did you ever feel a tension? It would probably be within, it might not even be outwardly towards your parents, but that type of pull from you, did you struggle with that or no?
Yeah, I mean, like even growing up, I was always like a very independent kid. Like my mom would go to like drop me off for this summer intensive, and I was like, see ya. And like she was like, you're just in New York, like are you sure you don't need anything? And I was like, I'll figure it out, like I got it.
Where does that come from? Because the whole story I've been listening to you, I'm like, I think that's there. I would have guessed that about you as a child. Where does that come from?
I don't know if I can pinpoint it, honestly. Like it's really been like since I was like at least like 14 or 15 that I was like that kid. And like I remember like even like our dance trips that we took as a studio, like I was always the one that they were like, oh, like if Fallon's got the sense of direction, like she knows where to go. Like I could always just kind of figure that kind of stuff out.
Is it your self-confidence in knowing that you can handle any situation? Is there a little bit of ignorance in the fact of like not knowing the dangers that are ahead? So you're just like, I'm just going to go. Like, where does that come from? Most people aren't wired like that. They want safety nets. They want to feel comfortable. They don't want the unknown. You're almost like willingly walking into the unknown and ready for whatever life presents you.
Yeah, I think I just kind of have a trust that I'm like, even if I fall on my ass, like I know some way or another I will figure it out. And like, even I would rather like fall on my ass on my own than like fall into this like tiny safety net and then like be propelled back to like where I'm not supposed to be. So it's almost like I would always kind of rather the rug be pulled out from under me. Like when I graduated, my parents were like, we'll help you out. And I was like, no, like I have to make this work now and like figure it out right now so that I don't just like rely on this and then it's like 6 years later and I'm like making like $100 a month and that's like not enough and they're just like, oh, let's not do that.
Man, that is maybe through this entire podcast your greatest asset. Like having the type of mindset that's like, I need to be able to accomplish it for me. Like most people, if they can get a handout, they're going to take a handout. If they can take the workload that they should carry and distribute it to other people that care about them and want to help them, they're going to distribute the workload. You're almost doing the opposite. You're like, no, I will take on the maximum amount of responsibility that I can, because that's going to yield the best version of me that can exist. And that best version of me is going to give me the most fulfilling life and yada, yada, yada. That you can't pinpoint it, but don't lose it. I mean, that is a very, very valuable character trait that not a lot of people possess. I mean, look at the average people you know in life. They don't take on more. They don't try to maximize, I want to struggle through this difficulty. They try to, get out of those situations. Maybe that's why fighting hasn't been that hard of a transition for you, because that's the same type of energy. You got to have that, I will take on this challenge. If I get knocked down, I'll get back up. I'm going to learn a lesson, etc. So you come back home. You come back into SFS. I remember I lightly talked to you about hey, are you considering fighting? And at first you gave me an answer of well, maybe. And the way you had said yes was, or the answer you had given me was that girl wants to fight. She just has to get things in line before she can fight. You know what I mean? That's how I felt at the end of the conversation. I was okay, I'm not going to bring it up again. But then shortly after you were okay, how do I do this thing? Let's talk to people about the first time you decided to schedule a cage fight, because this isn't dance and it's not even jiu-jitsu is a game compared to fighting. Yeah. You decided you were going to sign up to show up at a date, to get in a cage and fight a woman, right? What was that like mentally going through that? Do you think that everything had set you up to be able to handle it? What were the ups and the downs of it? How did your parents react, etc.?
Yeah, I definitely think one of the things that held me back from initially just being yes, let's do it, was I was oh, my mom's not going to like that I'm doing this. So I had that conversation with her, and she was I don't know about this. And I was well, I'm doing it. I'm just letting you know. So yeah, that was definitely something that I had to just kind of fill her in on and get her as comfortable with as I could. But yeah, for me personally, it was something I had thought about, and especially since I had stopped competing in jiu-jitsu for that prior year, really, I was my competitive energy was all there, and I was I still love jiu-jitsu and I still train it every day, but I was I really want to make that transition to the step beyond it and go all in with MMA. I had been a little more obsessive with it for years leading up to it and just hadn't made that step. So I was okay, now is the time, and I definitely felt ready. But yeah, I mean setting the date and everything was definitely gets your nerves going, and taking that trip out there. And I remember, yeah, my first fight, you weren't able to make it. You were out at a fight with Parisian. So it was me and Tristan. Kate came with us, and Jackson Barlow. And I was it wasn't even other people around the card. I was we're all here for me. The pressure's on. I can't be the one to this is the whole reason that we're out here in Iowa. But yeah, I mean, I remember that first fight was probably the best I've even felt in the cage. I remember stepping in there and seeing everything so clearly. Everyone talked about just being so focused on the moment, and you don't really remember it. And I was no, I remember every second of that first fight. And I was as soon as I finished that first fight, I was this is definitely what I'm meant to do. And I felt more confident than ever that I wanted to keep going.
Yeah, you find out in that first fight if you have it or not. And when you go through, I've talked to you about this so many times, when you go through a lot of darkness or a lot of struggle or a lot of setbacks and you overcome those things, it's the same as a fight. That's a metaphorical fight. You're facing something that's very difficult, and you're putting yourself on the line, and you're trying to find a way to get through it. And that's where the addiction comes from in fighting, is because you put yourself in a very difficult situation, but your greatness is usually on the other side of that difficulty. So you went out there and you put on a clinic in that first fight. I mean, it really was a clinic. I was with Parisian. I remember watching the fight and being you barely got touched. That girl was bewildered trying to figure out how do I fight this girl? She's piecing me up. I can't get to her. All my punches are missing, etc. You get done with that fight. You know you're meant to do this, and then all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, maybe not even 2 weeks later, you were back in the gym going, "So James, when can I fight again?" Right? And you really went all in this. Not to spend too much time on this part of your story, but the journey thus far to becoming a 3-0 amateur female fighter, lined up for your next title fight, what's been the character growth, the things you've experienced, the setbacks, just anything you would tell people that are looking from an outside in, the team that you have. Like here, you're able to train with a lot of like high level women that are incredibly dedicated, which is like kind of a rarity in MMA. You know that from your background. Just all of that period, for someone that's a fan of yours or it's following your journey, kind of walk us through from that first fight when you go, okay, this is what I'm going to do, to now the fact that you're probably turning pro within 4 months, 6 months. Walk us through that period.
Yeah, so I mean, that first fight happened, I think it was that Thursday. I came back for sparring night. I walked over to you after like a round or two, and I was like, so let's get into this next one. Yeah, there's so much confidence I get just from like the training room we have. Like the girls here, like training with Zoe every single day is like, I'm like, what's somebody else gonna do to me that like Zoe didn't already try to do? Like, I remember warming up with her the day after this last fight, and I was like, this is like not this is like a little bit harder than my fight was last night. Like, not for nothing. But yeah, just the energy we have here is like so important. And definitely, I would just say for anybody that's like looking to get into MMA or get into like any sport, like invest in like the room you're in. And like, it's not like, I think I always like had this idea that like the first place you train or like the first like environment you're in, like you should be like loyal to, and you should be like, that should be your home. And I think it's really just like you need to give yourself space to grow, and like whether you grow in that space or whether like that space taught you a lot of things and you move on and you like develop more elsewhere, like give yourself that space, because you do not need to be like tied down to something that doesn't serve you anymore. So yeah, that, and just like, yeah, I mean, my second fight was probably like my most difficult of the fights thus far. Like I definitely went to a three round war. And I finally like in the third round, like made the adjustments that I needed to like get to the finish that I needed.
In a way, it was actually extremely reminiscent of Spencer's last fight. The girl could have been up 2 rounds. I mean, for the people that haven't seen it, it's a girl that trains with Stephen Thompson of the UFC and Ray Thompson, his father. She doesn't have the best record, but she's been around a long time in martial arts. She's been training way longer than you in MMA, and she came out with every bit of her soul trying to win that fight. Like, one thing we got to shout out Greta for is she fought with everything she had to give, but you were able to figure it out in real time, make an adjustment, and finish her. Not win on the judges' scorecards, finish her. And that's like the best feeling in the world, to like force someone to stop fighting back inside of the bell. Do you think you've grown the most from that fight?
Yeah, I mean, I think it gave me the confidence in that, like, I'm like, even if I like get pushed to the limit, I remember getting off the stool after the second round, like my first fight, like getting into the third round, like I was standing up, like I was like easy, like this is fine. Like that, I remember standing up, my legs were heavy, and I was like, how am I going to do this? And I was like, okay, we need to make the adjustment. We need to like focus, figure it out. And just like, I tapped back into that self-confidence that I have, and just like was like, okay, I know I'm capable of doing this. Like, look at the situation, find the answer, and I was able to do it. So I definitely felt like I got a lot of confidence from that. And I mean, I think that translates to like the third fight, like walking out and like instead of going to the third round and figuring it out, it took me like 30 seconds. And I was like, okay, we're going to make the adjustment. We're going to grapple. We're going to go to the ground and like get that first round submission. So I think getting into that war like gave me confidence that if I do need to go to war and I go against a game opponent like that, like I'm 100% ready for it. But also like help me see things a little bit clearer and like actually adjust when I need to as soon as I see it.
To people that are listening to this that might not be in MMA themselves, that's what we call fight IQ. And fight IQ is one of the most important things to make it as a high-level fighter. You have to be able to make adjustments based on the problem. If you are the same robotic person for each fight that you perform at, you will win the fights where you stylistically have the right matchup against the right opponent, and you will lose every fight that doesn't fall into that category. And it's like when you can develop fight IQ and say, ooh, in this fight, I'm actually Fallon, the kickboxer that defends the takedowns, that gets off the wall and looks to outpace my opponent. In this fight, I'm Fallon, the mixed martial artist that's going to overwhelm you with pressure, put you on the wall, take you down, make you carry me, find a submission. It's like you want to have that type of diversity of technique. And it's like, it's one of the advantages I have in cornering someone like you. There's 2 types of fighters. There's very well-rounded fighters where it's like you have to adapt based on the setting and the situation, and you should know your A game. But someone else that's like an extreme specialist, they pretty much just shove their style down everyone's throat, and they have to know how to do that against different people. Like a Zoe. Like anyone that's, any female fighters out there, what are you going to do about her wrestling? Like, what are you going to do about it? You're not going to you're going to have some incredible solution to an unstoppable part of her game. Whereas with you, they can't really predict how you're going to fight them because you have great striking. You have good clinch work. You have good wall work. You have good jiu-jitsu. You have good athleticism. You have good cardio. You can mix those things in a very diverse set of different ways. You could be 10 different people on one given night. So if you can have the fight IQ to make the right adjustments, that is a very complex and difficult problem to solve because they don't know who they're going to fight. If they look at an old fight of you and say, okay, this is who she's going to be. No, that's who I had to be on that night. That doesn't mean that that's who I'm going to be on the fight with you. So let's talk about, you have your first title fight coming up against a girl that, in my opinion, is ranked top 5 to 10 in the nation. I mean, she is top tier. Zoe almost fought her. I don't want to spoil Zoe's announcement yet, but she has an international fight that she's going to be going to. You're stepping up and fighting the girl that she almost fought, who runs her mouth a little bit. She's pretty arrogant. What is it like knowing that, like, this is one of the last tests? This is the test that will reveal to you if it's time to turn pro and the blueprint for progress at this point. What does that feel like? What does the fight camp feel like? Is it more exciting? Is it more nervous? Do you feel the pressure more? Is it almost easier because you're like, you know what, this is the test I've been waiting for? Just kind of break that down for me.
Yeah, I think I've just been like ready for it, and like I know I want to make that next step to pro, and I know this is the right step to get there. So like people always ask me like, oh, do you train more in camp? And I'm like, no, like I train no matter what. I'm like, this fight's not going to happen probably now till October. Like we had been hoping for a little bit sooner at first. And like now it's in October and I'm like, everything else is literally the same. I'm like, all right, a little more time to get my diet on point. Like that's great. Like, but yeah, everything else is the same. I get to just prepare and be well-rounded. I haven't interacted with her too much myself yet, but it's definitely like, I want an exciting fight. I want that exciting matchup. So I think it'll be a really good time to like have a little bit of energy in between us and just push myself and get that test in.
Well, I'm incredibly excited for it. One of the things I want to ask you about is you're talking a lot about your martial arts journey and you've told your backstory. But one thing I ask of you guys here at the Academy, guys and girls, is to work on yourselves tremendously outside of the Academy. And I don't know, I think all martial arts schools should be like that. Some probably fail to actually be like that. But I feel like you've also gone through tremendous personal growth in these last couple of years through therapy, through different situations, through different relationships, through different environments. Talk a little bit about the journey on the things that have really helped you evolve and grow as a person, because you being a happier person that is more fulfilled, that gets her self-confidence back, her self-worth back, that is the fuel that will allow you to arrive at the destination of your goals. So what are the things you've been doing outside of the Academy that have yielded progress for you that make you sit here today with the energy that you have?
Yeah, I think I had to kind of find myself, like, I got back obviously when I moved back into training, but I also had to like find my identity outside of that. So I started just like figuring out things that I love doing, whether that's like just like taking a walk outside, whether that's hiking, snowboarding, roller skating, like just whatever it is, like just finding ways to like bring joy to myself every single day is really important. And whether it takes like 3 minutes or whether it's like a whole day adventure, I've really figured out that I need to prioritize that and like have that balance in my life, which has been huge. Reading, journaling, like things that I did like here and there over the years, but like I really didn't prioritize. I've just kind of learned like those are things that are important to myself, and like I'm like I can deal with things a lot faster if I sit down and journal about it for like 10 minutes than if I just let it like ruminate in my head for the entire day. So that was something I kind of like put a finger on this year and like have started to work on, and that's really helped me just be focused. And I'm like, now I can like come to the gym and I'm like 100% focused on training, and I don't have all these things like lingering in the back of my head all the time.
That's massive. And you just laid like such good insight for so many people that struggle with their mind. I tell people all the time, like, get it out. Write it down. Look at it like it's a math problem that you're trying to solve. Get it out of this intangible, the thoughts float in and out. You don't really solve them. So when you don't solve them, the problem's going to keep popping back in your head. Write it down, even if you don't think you can solve it. Even if you don't think there's a solution. If you put something on paper in front of yourself and you look at it every day, you will blow yourself away with the solutions you may come across. Like, you know what? What if I did this? And even if you just try it and it doesn't work, you will feel better trying to make progress against the problem than just letting it exist and not doing anything about it. You lightly mentioned that therapy was extremely beneficial for you. What was it about therapy? Was it finding the right person? Was it the perspectives? What was it about therapy that really made a tremendous difference for you?
Yeah, I think now I've been able to like transition out of it and do more like things on my own like that. But yeah, when I started going, just being like having somebody like ask you the questions that you like, you need to answer in your head, and you just like push down. So having somebody just like pull the things out of you that you like never really want to talk about and like put them out there, just made me feel a lot better and like took a lot of weight off of me after making that move back home. Yeah, I think that's the main thing, just like getting it all out there and dealing with things, and also just like seeing your weak points. I think that's something like we see it in martial arts. Like obviously, like if you train with somebody and you're like getting pinned every day in like one position, you're like, okay, that's where I need to do the work. That's what I need to put myself into. And therapy kind of did a similar thing for me, where it was like, where are your weaknesses? Like, where do we need to like develop as a person? And then like, how do we game plan that? And like, you can game plan your entire life if you just like actually are willing to lay it out there and not just like avoiding it all the time. So I think now I'm a lot more comfortable just like facing things head on. I think I would like avoid things and then get like just like upset over like little things that I would let build up over time. And now I'm a lot more comfortable just like, okay, like something's bothering me, like I'm going to set a boundary there, or like this isn't serving me anymore. I'm going to change my environment and things like that. So I think just learning how to like comfortably deal with things head on and not avoid anything at all was really important.
And what you're speaking to is you're speaking to finding your own power again. Most people are so disempowered and so broken and just shells of the people they should be. They don't say what they want to say. They don't act on the way that they feel, or maybe they do impulsively, but not for what's best for them. Like they're just shells of themselves. There's like a little kid inside, or like the dreamer inside, screaming for the type of person that they should be, the way they should speak, the way they should carry themselves, the boundaries they should set, all of these things, and they just don't do any of it. And it's like, well, then how can you feel good about who you are if you're living in a way that is so detached from what you would like to be or who you would like to be? And it's like, what I hear in your story is you're reconnecting to like, I can be me exactly as I am and be happy with that, and look at where my shortcomings are and work on those and set boundaries. And if people don't like them, that's on them. Because if you can feel good about who you are, like if I have to put a boundary down, it's on you. It's not on me at all if you don't like the boundary that I set, because I know who I am and I have my values and my morality and my thinking and my logic in alignment. So if I make a boundary, I know exactly why it's there. I know why it should exist. I know how it serves me and you. And then if you choose not to accept it, it's on you. It's almost like a more peaceful way of living. One of the things I want to ask you about, dreamers often struggle with condescending people. Dreamers often struggle with people, and a lot of times it could be the people that love you the most. It can be the people that are closest to you. And in their perspective, they're not being condescending. In their perspective, they're speaking for your own benefit, for the safe options, for what's reasonable. And that is one of the most difficult things for so many people that are trying to chase a dream, is they go to open up with their spirit about this dream that they have, or they want to, or like the path, or what they're doing, and it just feels like little stabs from somebody every time they're like, well, don't you think that maybe you should do this? Or what about when you take a really bad injury? Or like, it's always, I don't know how to perfectly articulate this question, but I think you know what I'm asking. How do you deal with that? Because it crushes most people. They eventually just give in, or they self-implode and have to get away from those people, which is not the right answer either. How do you experience condescending environments or people? And if so, like, how have you learned to cope with them because you are pursuing your greatness through MMA?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's got somebody like that in their life that's just got like little, like maybe they don't believe in your dream 100%, or maybe they like want you to be doing something different. They'll make little like comments that aren't necessarily like negative, but they're not pushing you in the right direction. And I think, yeah, for a while it was definitely like similar. Like I was like almost like reactive to it, and just like it would like make me upset or like angry. And I think the closer you get to yourself and the more you just know, like, this is the path I'm on and this is the path I'm supposed to be on, like, the more you can, like, internally shut those people down, but also just being willing to, like, voice it and be like, you know what, I don't agree with that. And saying that up front is just, it sets you free of it, because it doesn't just sit in your head and you're not just like, oh my gosh, this person thinks that I shouldn't be doing this and, like, I'm so pissed at them about it. It's like, they don't think I should be doing this, but, like, I am, and like these are all the reasons. Like you can list out a million reasons why you should be doing something. Like that's all that matters. And as long as you believe in yourself and you like are really rooted in your purpose in this life, then like that's all that matters.
I just wanted to ask you that question so that I could hear you say that answer, because if you had asked me advice, if this role was reversed and you would have said to me, James, how should I, or how do you deal with condescending people or people that jab it? That would have been my exact response. Like, I do not need your validation to believe that my dream is going to come true. I'll just make it come true. And then there is no belief required. When I have made my dream come true and I did all the things that I set out to do and I have this beautiful life that most people can't even dream of, you don't have to believe me anymore. I can be like, I did it. And it's like you have to have this self-belief to say, despite any external stimulus or belief in me or not belief in me, etc., it's irrelevant. And you cherish the people that do believe in you. Like Zoe believes in you to the end. And like that person you deeply cherish. Like you cherish people like that. But you don't need the validation from others. That's when you know you've healed enough psychologically to handle this journey. Because if you're reactive to the people that, push your buttons, it's just too much. Life is hard. Being a dreamer's hard. Fighting's hard, consistency's hard, and then you add in that, it's just too much, So hearing you say that, it really seems like you have your psychology in a place where, like, you know what? You don't need to believe in me yet. You can believe in me when it's already done. You can be like, oh my God, Fallon did it. Whatever that person is to you.
Yeah. And I think it's important too, just to like your close-knit group of people obviously should be people, like the people you spend like every hour with every single day should be people that support you and you can't spend 12 hours a day with somebody like making jabs at you. Like if your partner is like that, like it's not going to work. They're going to have to go. But yeah, just like really like invest in the relationships with people that are supportive of you. Like we've had so many people here at the gym that are like that, and like other people that I work with, and like you find those people and you see it right away. Like you see people that are also dreamers or also just like outright supporters, and like those are the people that you need to just invest your relationships with.
You just said something that's so powerful, that anyone with a dream, anyone that's young and wants to pursue something great, you need to listen to what she said. You need to go back and replay that a couple times, but you need to recognize the fact that like your environments are going to shape you dramatically. If a partner is not serving the person that you're meant to become, it is not selfish to say, I have to go a different direction. So many young people are crippled by the idea that speaking up for themselves or like using their voice for their desires or their needs or their wants or their happiness or what's going to bring them fulfillment is selfish. And they suppress who they are to cater to environments that they're a part of, versus do the opposite. Find people that are genuinely supportive, that want to see you win. The thing I watch closest with the people around me, I do not put any stock in how people treat me or are to me when things are really good. Because like I'm serving a ton of people. I give so much energy and effort to a lot of people. Of course they're going to be like, oh, you're awesome. Thank you so much. I really watch people when things are difficult, when things are a struggle, when, let's say I was spread too thin and failed them one time. It's like, do they, throw me out as worthless because of one time I failed? Or do they look at, for 100 times you've been there for me, you've helped me through this, you've done this, like, I got your back if you're struggling this time too. And so many young people, if they could recognize, you've got to find a way to look at things that way. Is this environment nurturing me for what I need out of this life? It's not selfish to pursue your dreams. If anything, it's the least selfish thing you can do. Because if you can become the best version of yourself to ever exist, your family is going to be better, your children are going to be better. How about all the people you mentor, all the communities that you interact with, all the people you speak to? The ripple effects of you bringing out the best version of yourself are so impactful that it's almost the worst thing you could do is to suppress who you have the potential of being in this life. There's a quote that's in my wallet. You've heard it from the things that says, like, the only hell in life is meeting the person you could have become. And that quote has haunted me since my early 20s because I'm like, I don't want that to be me. I don't want that to be me. And so many times, young people, they just give up on themselves because someone else doesn't want them to be what they want to be. And it's like, well, I guess I'll make you happy. You're my boyfriend, or you're my girlfriend, or you're my father, or you're my boss or friend. If you want this version of me, then I guess I should be that version. No. Yeah. You need to be who you want to be.
And I think this goes hand in hand with it, especially as somebody that has, like, had gone all in on a dream and then, like, stepped away from it. Like, remember that that's okay. And, like, if you're, like, chasing something and if you're 18 and you are, like, have all this pressure to decide where you want to go to college and, like, what you want to do with your entire life, like, you can always make a change. And you can, like, go all in on a career and decide, like, 5 years down the road, like, you know what, like, I want to do something different. And, like, you can make that change. And, like, you might fall on your ass. You might be, like, dead broke for a month or two. But, like, if you put your all in it, it's going to pay off in the end of the day. And it's going to matter a lot more, like, to wake up happy a year from now than it is to, like, wake up tomorrow and, like, be, like, comfortable but unhappy.
1,000%. I'm somebody that throughout my life, I think because of some things that have happened to me and stuff, like, I've resented feelings for large parts of my life because, like, I'm very logically driven. I'm very black and white. It's like the gray area podcast, but I'm like a very black and white person. Like, I love mathematics and, like, things that I can say, like, this. And I've honestly resented feelings because so many times feelings can mislead. Feelings can guide you. But if you don't love what you're doing, you're going to burn out. You're going to quit on yourself. You're going to let yourself down. You're going to let other people down because life is already hard. And, like, you need to recognize when you don't love what you're doing. And that's what you're speaking to right now. It's like so many people, they set out on a path, and initially that is what they wanted. But over time they changed. And then they're almost scared to let go of that identity because they're like, well, this is all I've been up to this point. Maybe you had to get to that point doing what you're doing to be prepared for day one of this next journey. And had you not gone through that, you would not be in a place, like, had you not been Fallon the dancer with the dedication, with the consistency, with the 4-hour practices, with going to NYU, with the struggles that you had in Jersey and CKO and, oh, you know what, I stay here and learn what I can, you would be a fraction of the woman that you are that is able to be what you can be inside of that cage. So it's like, don't think that Chapter 7 of your story, let's say it was a great chapter. That doesn't mean that Chapter 8 can't be better than you could have ever imagined in a completely different direction. That's a huge thing for people to remember.
Yeah. And I think there's so much sense of, like I had such a big sense of, like, failure. Like, when I, like, moved back home or when I decided to, like, stop dancing and I was like, I failed. Like, this is what I was going to do. And, like, I'm not doing those things. And I think it's, like, so important to just kind of, like, let go of that and, like, really trust in the path that you're on. And, like, even if things didn't go, like, the exact direction you went, like, you're rerouted, but you're going somewhere even better. So if things don't work out with, like, a relationship, with a job, with a career that you're on, like, whatever it is, like, if you move somewhere and you end up hating it, like, you're not stuck there. You can change your life.
Do you regret that you were a dancer for all those years?
Not at all.
Exactly. I mean, talk to most people, even the times that they were all in on something, and let's say you could classify it as, and failed. It's incredibly rare to find someone that regrets all of that time, where they were passionate, where they poured their heart in, where they pulled out work ethic they didn't even know they had, where they really leveled up tremendously. That you don't regret that. It was necessary for your development. Fallon that puts a UFC world title around her waist one day, makes millions of dollars, is crying her eyes out. You did it. You're champion of the world. You wouldn't be like, oh, but I wasted that time and did. You'd be like, thank God that young girl had something that pulled her into the future, that brought out the version of her, that was able to put me into a place that I was able to do day one of this damn jiu-jitsu thing. When I got beat up, I went back, and then I went back again. It's all necessary. And if people would look at their life as like, it's a ride. Every part of an extreme roller coaster might not be your favorite, but it's all necessary to complete the entire cycle. So it's like, you got to trust the process a little bit. You got to know that like there can be brighter days than you've ever seen if you just keep moving forward.
Yeah, 100%.
So last thing I want to ask you about on the podcast is looking into the future. If we were looking 6 months to a year from now or a couple years from now, you know, because we'll definitely film another podcast down the road. What does the journey look like for you? What do you see for you in the next 6 months, year, 2 years? What are the things you're focused on? What are goals that you've set out for yourself? Like, we're going to wrap this thing up with paint me the vision. Make me
my vision board.
Maybe we can make this creepy. If we were going to sit down 3 years from now, and that Fallon, because she will exist, is going to look back and she's going to see the words that this Fallon spoke that is trying to create that version, what does that look like?
Yeah, so definitely short term. I mean, I got the title fight coming up in October. Right after that, like, just planning to go professional with it and, like, keep pursuing. So I'd say 3 years from now, like, ideally a few professional fights in, looking to the UFC, getting into there. I want to be fighting those top-ranked people, fighting the best in the world. And, like, I look at that, but it's, like, the day-to-day of that life is literally, like, no different than right now. Like, right now I get up every single day. I work early mornings. Like, I've been up since 4:30 to go train people and get them to work out and, like, make them be their best. And then I get to come here and push myself and, like, a couple other people to be their best. But, yeah, it's just more of that, like, every day. Like, I love the grind. I love getting up and, like, knowing that every single day I come and I put myself in this room and I make myself get better. And I'm like, even on the days where I'm like exhausted, or like last night we did like how many side control rounds, and it's like you're getting held down. It's like, will you get out of every single one? Like, maybe not, but like you're a lot closer to getting out of like the side control that matters than you were yesterday. So yeah, I like love that. I'm like, I look into the future and it's like the goals are a little bit bigger at that time. Like the short-term goals will be a little bit different than they are right now, but it's just another fight. It's just another day to get better. And yeah, I just want to keep going.
I love it. I mean, that's spectacular. Last night, right as I was leaving the academy, you know that new woman, Natalie, she's the wrestler. I was leaving. I said, hey, great job. And she's like, thank you very much. She had recently expressed that she wants to do her first fight. And I said to her almost the exact words of what you just said. I said, listen, if you want to be a successful fighter, I'm going to tell you the secret of all secrets. There is nothing special to it. If you can learn to show up and work hard and do ordinary things exceptionally well and just keep consistency, believe in yourself, be a good teammate, work hard, it will happen. It's not like this, you need this crazy formula, you need these certain genetics, you need these certain gifts. None of that is true. If you're already a college wrestler, you are already a cut above most people. Just focus on day-to-day being the best you can be, and whatever you want to line up becomes possible. It's exactly what you just said. It's like so many people never get started because they think it's too out of reach. And it's like, if you would just do the simple things around people that can support you and care about you and guide you correctly, next thing you know, 6 months down the road, you're speaking from a completely different perspective because you are changed by the process. You know, so Fallon, it was truly a pleasure to sit here and, you know, speak with you today. We filmed an hour and 10 minutes of content. Anything else that you'd like to say, thank yous you'd like to give, shout outs to teammates or, you know, to your family, anything that you want to capture in this moment in time, put it on the podcast and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for having me. You've definitely been one of the most influential people this past year in like leveling up and making the right steps. big shout out to the girl squad we have here. Like, the whole team, though, like, everybody's great, but, like, the girl squad just keeps the energy so excited every single night. And we're all here pushing ourselves to be the best. But yeah, just like the energy in the room, everybody's dedication. I'd like to shout out to some of my like sponsors that have been with me since the beginning. King Steel Corporation. If you have any steel needs, definitely let them know. And Aaron Cantrell Fitness. I also work out of there, but they are a huge supporter of me, which has been really awesome. But yeah, other than that, just looking forward to what's next.
Do you have a favorite quote of all time? Do you have something? I'm a big quote person. Do you have a favorite quote?
I don't think I have a specific one. I really love the message behind chop wood, carry water, which is really what I just kind of talked about. And that is just learning to fall in love with the process and to just appreciate every single day and like don't make these big dreams and like think that they're so far off and that things are going to be like different when you're there. Like things will be the same, but you'll just like have accomplished a little bit more. So I think it's just important to like fix your days and like my day-to-day a year ago from now was like god awful, and like my day-to-day now is like amazing. And it's like you can make those changes and you can make little changes, like even from like a month ago, like changing little things in your day adds up over time, and just invest in yourself.
Well, awesome. So anyone that's listening to this podcast that's enjoyed it, I mean, I'd first ask you to share it, because a huge part of being an athlete is getting exposure, is getting people to know your story, wanting to back your journey, you know, building a brand in yourself as an athlete, as a spokesperson for empowered women, as a mentoring community, as a dream chaser. And if you're interested in sponsoring Fallon for a fight camp or maybe her professional debut, don't be afraid to reach out. Like a lot of the times people feel disconnected from like athletes and stuff, and maybe from an NFL player you are, because they're at a level where they're getting bombarded 24/7. At this starter level, the difference that one small business contribution can make is monumental. So if you feel that you're in a position where you'd love to be able to advertise your company alongside a dream chaser that's going to support your brand and show people, you know, that like you're about that elite energy, please reach out. Don't be shy. So thank you so much for joining me today, Fallon, and we'll wrap this up.
Yeah, thank you.